Well, welcome to Wickedly Smart Conversations, episode number 2. I'm Eric Freeman, and I'm here with Jamie Burton, and we're going to sit down today with Nick Choat. Now, Nick Choat is currently a small business owner in Southwest Florida. He is the CEO of several sports clip haircut franchises, and so he has had to really navigate the digital marketing waters around small businesses. Now, I should say, too, that Nick's background actually is a lot more corporate. He's held positions at places like Ernst & Young and Boeing, VeriSign, the Walt Disney Company as some examples. But he put together his experiences with digital marketing for essentially a brick and mortar in a book called Online or Flatline. And we found it very unique in that a lot of the books out there today are written by people operating in the digital space about digital marketing, but Nick brings a unique perspective with his sports clip haircut franchises. So with that, let's get on to sitting down with Nick.
I'm so excited that we have you on the phone today, Nick. Really, one of the reasons I think SEO is such a big topic today, and one that I'm personally passionate about, is because with my first startup, I had heard the term SEO and was able to kind of put together that it meant search engine optimization, but what did that really mean? And I didn't feel that I had enough experience at the time to take that on myself, nor did my business partner. And so we did a Google search for companies that exceeded in SEO and search engine optimization, and we came across a company, and they kind of wowed us and dazzled us with their platform and their offering. And so as a startup, we had heard that it was something that we really needed to invest in. And so we ended up working with this company for, I'd say, 6 months to a year, paying them almost $500 a month. And they kind of tried to show us the tools and tactics that they used, but we always felt like it was kind of this lost art, and we weren't really privy to the information of what they were doing behind the scenes. So I'm so glad that we have you on with us today on this podcast, because I think in looking back, there's a lot of things that we could have done differently, and things that we may have been able to do ourselves before looking to outsource SEO for our company. So we would love to kind of hear your story. Eric, thank you so much for making the introduction as to what has prompted you to dive into SEO, and more importantly, how we can help the listeners today learn how they can be impactful with SEO on their own before looking to hiring somebody else.
Yeah, that's a great topic. You know, I kind of got started with this as a business owner in the early days, looking at a lot of different mechanisms to acquire clients. You know, when you first open a business, you literally have nothing as far as a client base, and how do you grow that? And you can rely on word of mouth, and you know, I wasn't comfortable doing that. So I was experimenting with a lot of different things, very traditional coupons, direct mail, those kinds of things. But I kept having this nagging feeling in the back of my mind about search. You know, having a digital background, even now being a brick and mortar small business owner, I always knew that a lot of people would be looking for my types of services through search. But to your point, Jamie, really, how do you affect that? I mean, because there's a lot of variables that go into it. It's ever changing. So I just kind of let it lie dormant for about 6 months. And what really started to burn me was with my first store, I was never able to see that store come up on the first page of results. So it's like, you know, something's going on here. So, I had access to some folks in the search space that did a quick keyword analysis, and they realized that the store name was actually the issue. The store name, the center name itself, was the prominent keyword on the first homepage, on the homepage itself. So that tells Google that must be an important keyword. So of course, I mean, even if I told you the name of the center now, you'd never remember it. You know, I rarely remember it except when I pay my rent every month. Nobody was searching on that keyword. So we literally just changed the store name to something that was more common. It happened to be the city I was located in. And all of a sudden I started popping up on the top. So that got me really excited about the opportunity here. But it still came across as a little bit of black art. So I started to really dig in on this and try to dissect it from a small business owner point of view, and to identify those things that you can do. And there's some things you can't do. Most business owners can't because it's too technical, but there's a lot you can do.
So Nick, a lot of our clients come to us either in the process of building their online presence really for the first time, or they've just built it and they're kind of looking for where to go. And, they all encounter this SEO topic, and it either requires sitting down and reading an entire book or researching things online, which tend to contradict each other, or even worse. Sometimes you can read an old article on SEO, implement its tactics, and it actually penalizes you.
Right.
So it has, kind of the inverse thing you're looking for. And what would you say to people, why is this area so murky, so mysterious? What's kind of your definition of SEO, and how should people really think about it?
When I try to avoid the acronym SEO, because to your point, that points you to this world of murkiness and unknowns and things like that. The basics are, how do you perform well in search? Not to worry about the last 20% of the very exotic things that you could possibly do, whether you do it yourself or pay someone. So what are the fundamental things that drive search results? And it's good content, relevant content. And you see this over and over again, even from Google: good content, relevant content, active web pages, mobile-friendly, a mobile-friendly website environment. If you're doing those things, you're going to probably start to do well in search. You'll be cognizant of how people are finding you in search, what keywords they're using, and to make sure that helps drive both your website content and your content marketing strategy if you have one. But if you do those things, Google or the search engines have a tendency to want to reward you for it, as opposed to, worried about backlinks, worried about, keyword stuffing. And those aren't necessarily, keyword stuffing's bad, but, backlinks. There's some things out there that could help you, but until you kind of do those fundamental things, the rest of the stuff probably is not going to help you that much.
And I think that's the point of this topic, right? So we have this understanding that there's a lot that goes into SEO, as you mentioned, that is very technical. And so I think there is this inflection point where hopefully somebody will be or have the opportunity to eventually hire somebody. But let's kind of take a look at what you just said about what a small business owner or somebody, an entrepreneur or creative could do on their own. How the capabilities that they do have, where would they start?
So to be able to describe, kind of my view of search from a business owner point of view, and to answer your question, I've kind of separated the search space into a couple of different categories. And I'm going to try to avoid the acronyms and some of the technical jargon that goes with this, because that's not important. But I see the two aspects of search are what is on your web page itself, and then there's everything else. And the everything else is kind of where it gets really interesting, to me at least. So what's on your homepage, just to get started, there are the really deep technical aspects. Is your website mobile friendly? Yes or no? Do you have fast loading pages? Yes or no? Those things, you can have some insight as a business owner depending on what you have access to on your web page, but it gets pretty technical pretty fast. The one thing on your homepage, though, that most business owners, if they don't, they should have this, is direct access to the content. And what that means is, just like in my first bad example of how I got started, is your content relevant to how people search? And not the keyword stuffing of just, using the same keyword over and over and over again, because people don't search based on that. They may use those keywords. But look at the website content from an outsider's point of view, and ask yourself, if they're looking for your types of services or products, what would they be entering into Google? And it can be very simple. Like in my case, I own Sport Clips Haircuts. They're going to be searching on haircuts near me or haircuts in the location, barbers, the basic keywords. And then just make sure that's, well represented on your website. The second thing that's very important and very much in control of a business owner, but rarely happens, is making sure your content stays fresh. Stale content over time starts to drive your results lower. because it's signaling to Google and the search engines that maybe this site isn't that relevant because it's not staying current and relevant with the needs of the people that are actually searching for this. So, I just recommend people on that front, business owners or folks in businesses, small businesses, have a refresh cycle. Go in and change some imagery around. You can do seasonal photos and things like that, but have know where you can change the content and have some kind of methodology to go change it. So that's kind of the on the homepage stuff. Part of it's very technical. Part of it you may have to go to an outside web developer to help you with. The content pieces of it, other than some exotic keyword research, which I don't recommend. I mean, people aren't, exotic searchers. But most of that stuff, the content in fresh content is very much in control of any business owner.
So Nick, just to step back a little bit, one thing that we do is we teach a lot of people who are just getting their online presence up and running. And so they've got a lot to do. They've got to get their destination website up. They've got to get their mailing list going. They've got to get their their social stuff out there. Where should they fit SEO in? How important is it? And where should it fit into that process as they're getting themselves online?
Well, that's a great question. There's certain aspects of search that are critical. It is not just in the customer acquisition phase of what you're trying to accomplish. It's in customer retention. And it's kind of counterintuitive in some respects, but what's emerged, and this is kind of the other half of my search world that has become to me now 3+ years of being a small business owner, is the world of the crazy world of online directories and reviews. So online directories are the places like Yelp, Google My Business, Bing My Business. There's hundreds of those out there. And the good news is it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of world. But you need to get in there. You need to have your business represented accurately in those directories. One, it drives search results. Two, people are actually using those directories to find your products and services. So the sooner you get there and take control of it, the better. So that's kind of like a fundamental thing. Just get in there, get it done. It's nasty. It's awful. Nobody wants to have to do it, but it is very important to do that. So just get it out of the way and have that locked and loaded. The second is, which requires operational things, which in my world, if you look where I was at the beginning to where I am now, I knew intuitively that customer reviews were important. You want to have people say good things about your business. And that's a good thing, especially in the online presence. But what's happened here is that has become almost one of the biggest driving factors to drive your search results, because it's signaling to Google and the search engines how well you're doing as a business. And that is a critical factor to get to the top search results. So the more good reviews you have, the higher you're going to perform. Well, you can't manufacture a few hundred reviews overnight. So to your point, Eric, to me at least, you need to establish an approach to collecting reviews and managing your online presence from the very beginning. And yeah, it takes a little bit of operational maintenance to work with those, but the sooner you get to that, I don't know what the break point is for Google, but let's say 100 Google reviews, the quicker you're going to get to the higher results. So, but that takes time to accomplish that. It does not and should not happen. In fact, it should not happen overnight. Google will probably penalize you if they see all of a sudden 50 reviews show up overnight. That's going to be a pretty bad signal to Google. But so those two things, get your online directory presence down and get the review process started, need to happen from the beginning.
And I think it's important to remind everybody that we really are talking about if you have a small business, if you're a small business owner or have a brick and mortar, because if somebody is creating this online presence that may not have a brick and mortar, then the online directories may not be as important. So what could they do in place of that? Is there something like Pinterest, or do you just feel like they should double down on the search engine optimization within their website?
That's a good question, but it's kind of hard to nail down. I still think, and I'm trying to imagine, what the audience's products they're selling online would be, but the review piece of it is still relevant. I mean, just look at, Amazon's revolutionized reviews in the online world. I'm sure all of us, when we've searched for products, have taken a look at those reviews before we determine if we buy our products. How that impacts results, maybe not quite as much as local businesses. So if you're just a pure online play, what really starts to come to the forefront is being a mobile-friendly online play. And there's a lot of technical things that go into making that happen. I kind of advise people that are going that space, start from that perspective, because you can always go and do desktop-based online work as a I won't say afterthought because it's still important, but design your world to be mobile-friendly, because if you look at the statistics, that's where more and more people are actually spending their time online, whether it's shopping or looking for information or both. And if you're not performing well on mobile, Google will penalize you. So there's some simple things that owners can do. Just resize your website and see how it re-renders as the screen, your actual website is getting smaller to see if it works well. And you'll see if it's not working well. You'll notice that. Again, there's a lot of technology that goes into that. The other thing, if you're starting out in that world, is just make sure that your web developer that's working with you gets that requirement as mandatory, that the site be mobile friendly. And now I'm distinguishing that from a mobile app, which is a completely different set of topics to discuss. But that mobile friendliness needs to be a clear requirement, and you need to test that when you're getting your website delivered back to you.
Nick, would content marketing perhaps be the analog for kind of pure online plays? Does that give you the same sort of effect as something like a Google review for say a brick and mortar?
Yeah, in some respects, it's pretty similar, because in both cases, the reviews and the content marketing, it's a credibility positioning. If you're doing good content marketing, you're telling your audience that receives that content that you have a certain expertise in your space, and that should build your reputation amongst that group, which should then help, bolster your search results. So I think they're pretty equivalent. You're opening yourself up, whether it's your intellectual property or it's your operations in the brick and mortar, to show people how well you do what you do.
Yeah, I mean, not being an SEO expert myself, one thing I've wondered about is, if we think back to the early days of Google, it was all about PageRank, or, how many pages out there are pointing back to you. Yep. That was kind of the breakthrough that Google had. So with content marketing, have they just gotten a lot more sophisticated? Is it not so much how many links are there back to you, but how many people are talking to you, are talking about you?
Right. But we could just use a simple example. What if you have a blog on your webpage? So you're actively posting to your blog, you're getting some engagement with your audience and things like that. So you're showing fresh content. The engagement's showing to the search engines that you're relevant. And then you should, from that, be able to increase your rank.
So in terms of increasing rank, whether you're completely digital or you have a brick and mortar, you want to see the results after you put in all of these efforts. And as you've stated, I think it's very important to know, because this is one thing that I found kind of disconcerting when I was first starting, is I wanted to see the results very quickly. And as you just stated, it could take a lot of time. So how can you tell if your rank is getting increased, aside from the obvious of seeing yourself on page one or your business of Google? But is there a way you can tell if your search optimization is working?
I'm sure there are tools out there that can show you that, but that's to your early point about getting into the black art. I'm not exactly sure, and I'm not certain that SEO providers, because things change, and Google doesn't, they don't share their algorithms to the world. They do publish a list of best practices that you can follow and should be following, but they're not going to tell you, if they've changed their search results algorithm, that algorithm changed, and you could adjust your tools accordingly. So I'm a little bit reluctant on that point to your earlier story, Jamie, $500 a month, and you're really not sure what's happening there. So why bother even making the investment? You still don't know what's happening, and you didn't spend the $500 a month. So I do the good old fashioned stuff. I just keep an eye on search results, and once I enter the first page, I look at the competition. I try to discern from the results, why someone may be performing at a higher level than I am. A lot of times you get beat out just by the in the brick and mortar world, at least, by the online directories. Like Yelp is notorious for getting better results than you are, just because they've got more followers. They've got a stronger engagement model than any individual store, brick and mortar, would have. So I just do the good old fashioned thing. And, when I can't we haven't talked much about paid search. When I'm not performing well in for a particular common keyword, I'll spend a little bit of money on AdWords and take it to number one. Whether it's $5 a day or whatever it is, and an example for me was, and I'm doing this now, I wasn't performing well for the keyword barber. I cut hair. That's what my businesses do. I don't personally, but so, barber is a pretty common way for people to search in this space. And I don't have barber in the brand name. I don't have barber on the website. I've got some categories called barber, but it's kind of buried. And so I went and invested a little bit in AdWords to see if I can go to number one, and it's kind of working. It doesn't, granted, it cost me to do that, but I didn't have to pay someone $500 to place that same AdWord campaign.
Yeah, Nick, actually, I wanted to bring up the $500 a month that Jamie was spending. And, one thing that I have noticed, particularly with our clients, is that anytime you get into an area that is sort of a black art, where there aren't well understood technical solutions, and I think the reason we have that with SEO is because the way that SEO is working is largely controlled by proprietary methods of a company, right, that aren't well published.
Right.
But anytime we get into those areas, and there are a few, with internet services, you get into a little bit of, at times, snake oil salesmen out there who will come along and say, for X dollars a month, we'll get you number one, whatever. Is that a fair characterization from what you've seen, or is that an unfair one?
Well, or you could just say they're crooks too. To make a point. But I'll give you a very specific story. I just, in the last few months, helped co-author a local piece on Google My Business. It's an online directory. It's very important in the Google ecosystem of products, and your business needs to be represented in Google My Business. So the whole tone of the article was, hey, there's this great thing called Google My Business that can help your business get better search results and help grow your business. And it's absolutely free. It's absolutely free. Any business owner could, work with it. It doesn't take, a rocket science to deal with Google My Business. That's the good news. So it wasn't probably 2 hours after the piece went public that the journalist I was working with got a call from one of his loyal readers and said, do you mean that's $700 a month I've been paying this one guy to manage my Google My Business account? I don't have to do that anymore? And the answer was absolutely no. I mean, you're paying $700 for almost, after the initial setup, almost nothing. So the fact that wasn't disclosed to this fellow, that kind of points to snake oil.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, given that, and again, keep in mind that a lot of the people we teach they're just bringing that first online presence up. Mm-hmm. They're just building their first website, getting their mailing list going, starting sort of their social, and SEO is on their list. I mean, what would you say to a person like that in terms of how to get started, and then how to determine whether or not they need help?
I would think through the search space. Pull out the Google best practices in search. It's published updated every year. Some of it's very technical, but some of it's just good old fashioned. Here's what we mean by good content kind of stuff from a Google point of view. So pull that off, read through it, methodically go through. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this, and prioritize it. Set up a little work plan on when you want to accomplish one of those best practices, and and over time build it out. Don't ignore it, because it does take time to, one, get things in place, and second, for Google to respond to that. And then just kind of work through it. But those things that, you don't quite understand, that may be too technical for the business owner, that's the kind of thing you may want to take to a third party and say, look, can you do this very specific thing? Not going to open up, just do all my SEO, but, of this list of, whatever number of best practices that Google says, can you do line number 14 to my website for me? Or help me do it, depending on the nature of it. So that way you're comfortable that when you're not being taken advantage of, 2, it's aligning with Google best practices, so it's intuitively going to help you. And 3, you're going to have it well contained, so you're not spending $500 a month for something you don't quite understand. So I'd really like that best practices document just as a guiding force, just as something to help navigate through this very complex, what can be very complex world.
Yeah, and it, as a do-it-yourself strategy, that sounds like a great place to start. And, hey, at the end of that process, you're going to be a lot more educated about this space than you were before. Right. Even if you do go to someone outside, you're gonna know a little bit more about what you're getting.
Right.
We think about this topic of SEO, and it's really all about getting search results to ultimately point to you. And so what are the scope of things that we actually have our hands on that we can change to do that? I mean, clearly there are tweaks to the website and things beyond that, but kind of what's that list of what can we actually use to affect those search results?
Well, you talked about content, because ultimately it comes down to content, either searchable content or relevant content or all the above. So in the broad sense, I think that is the one area that's very common, whether you're on 100% digital or brick and mortar or a combination of the two. Having relevant content that helps your potential clients, or even clients for that matter, make better decisions, learn whatever the objective may be. I think that's kind of at the fundamental aspect of it. And, as a business owner, you kind of really need to, because you're getting into the minds of your customers or potential customers, understand what helps them. And that's healthy on many levels. That, not only drives a content marketing strategy, but helps you position your business, maybe even reposition your business once you learn more. So I think that's the one thing out there. I think, having those channels to listen to your customers once you've engaged with them or they're trying to engage with you, so you can get that feedback on an ongoing basis, is one, good, healthy for your business, because it helps you as an owner get smarter about what's working. But two, it's good, yet another source of content that drives the search results. So at the highest level, but the most practical level, I think if you, as a business owner, if you kind of face it that way, not that you ignore all the technical aspects of it, because those can be important here, but all the technical SEO stuff in the world is not going to help you if you're not speaking to your audience or listening to your audience. So to me, that's kind of the biggest, this is in your grasp, Mr. Business Owner, Mrs. Business Owner.
So step one, have great content
around it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think beyond that, clearly there are technical things you can do with your website to help Google, essentially. And then beyond that, is it just content out there that, improves your reputation and points back to you?
Yeah, probably. There's the whole world of, it's not, I mean, it kind of helps search, but pushing content out to your audience. So you've got an audience that really wants to be a part of your community, and you want to foster that over time. So how do you get, whether it's newsletters or things like that, not necessarily direct search, but you're feeding the community, which then kind of drives the communications, on an ongoing basis. So there's all aspects of that. Because if you're, to me at least, not being able to position your business, regardless of digital versus brick and mortar, as a credible business, that with credible leadership and things like that, regardless, and you're probably not going to do that well. If people don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. How do you develop that trust? Or they can't. Or if they can't understand you. Yeah.
Question that I had is, let's say somebody has worked with a company in the past, or they've done it themselves and they've made some mistakes. Can we talk for a moment about Google's Blacklist? How do you get on it? How do you get off of it?
Wow.
What can you do to avoid that?
Well, I'm not sure who outside of Google would really know how to answer that question definitively. Because if they told you what caused you to get on the blacklist, people would clearly avoid it.
Yeah.
But to me, the blacklist is like, you business owner, you just did something stupid. You keyword stuffed, and that was probably bad advice to get. But if you've done that, even naively, to your question, Jamie, how do you get off that blacklist? I am not sure. Because honestly, I spend my time trying to think about things I could do to completely avoid the blacklist. So if you get, the danger for a business owner is they get a recommendation that kind of doesn't make sense, or they wouldn't be proud of it if the world knew that they were doing whatever that is. That's probably not a good thing to endorse and to actually implement. So whether that's keyword stuffing or buying backlinks from a questionable backlink farm or something like that, is just there isn't any magic here. This is all algorithms. This isn't trying to trick Google. Because if you try to trick Google, there's a pretty good chance you're going to make a big mistake and potentially end up on that blacklist. So this whole world of, this is the latest thing, that can, get past the Google algorithms to give you best. It's probably not a good thing. You probably don't want to be first when you go into this, or even trust that the person telling you that even knows what that means. Because people can make up anything and tell you,
Well, and as soon as they figure out it's happening, you're going to be penalized for it anyway.
That's why I come back to, you're doing great content that's relevant to your audience. You're engaging with your audience. You're listening to what they're telling you through your digital world. And that's all public, which is part of this. That's a big part of this. And just run your business in your online presence like you would run your business if you're face-to-face with somebody. Would you be proud of what you just did if you were trying to explain that to the next customer that you talk to? And if you're not, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But how to get off the blacklist, who knows?
What do you recommend? You mentioned how you changed the name of your store to have a higher rank within search. What do you recommend in terms of national versus local search and optimizing your location?
Well, local search is driven today by fundamentally the presence in online directories. Google My Business, Yahoo My Business, Yelp My Business, and it's a dawning world. There's hundreds of those out there, but Google's looking, or search engines are looking for consistency and completeness. So all of your data is very consistent. For example, if you have a street address and it has road in the street address, is it RD period? Or are you spelling road out? Well, Google doesn't care. It just needs to be consistent, because if it's not consistent, those are sending signals that's not necessarily the same business. I mean, it may not be big signals, but you don't want to take that chance. So consistency and completeness in the online directories is really, really fundamental for local businesses. And then now is the presence of online reviews, either through Google, Yelp. On your website is your number one review source right now. If you're looking for search results, is to demonstrate to the world that you're willing to take reviews in public on your website and respond to them. So those are all critical drivers in the local world. Nationally, that gets harder, because you run the risk of competing with very large brands then. So if you're trying to rank for keywords, common keywords, it's going to be really hard, because those national outfits you may be competing against are deep pockets. So they have the resources that they can use to tweak and refine and so forth. So my kind of fundamental recommendation on that part is don't compete in the mainstream. Compete in what's called the long tail. So those are the niche keywords, or niche products or services and things like that. And by the way, that's not necessarily bad business, period. Because if you want to go against an Amazon, well, good luck with that. So if you pick your niches and you develop your search strategies around those niches, you have the chance to win at those. And that can be very, very lucrative, because to the big guys, the big nationals, it's too small for them. It's probably not economically smart for them to go after those smaller niches. So that's where what's called the long tail work really starts, I think, to pay off if you're competing nationally.
What's that phrase? The riches are in the niches?
True. I'm a big believer in that.
Nick, so we've obviously both encountered our share of less reputable SEO vendors, let's say. But that said, this is an area where there are some true experts out there, and people who really get this, and people who can really have an impact. As I said, particularly on large companies where this is just crucially important. Do you want to say a little more about that? Are there vendors, services, whatever, that you've encountered that you've had a really good experience with?
That has been, for me, finding these folks, at least, these companies, a very beneficial aspect of helping me grow my understanding and education in this space. For example, there's an outfit in Seattle called Moz, M-O-Z, Moz Local, that got me hooked on them. They sell products, they sell services, good products from what I can tell. I don't use any of their products. They have some free ones and things like that you can try with. But and I suggest people do try that. But whether you buy, that's your decision. But it's this topic has resonated through this whole podcast is the power of content. They hook me through their content. They are just brutally honest. They regularly communicate with their audience, very relevant. They'll admit when they do or don't know something, and that honesty, credibility, and expertise, I trust. Every week when I'm getting their blog push, they do a weekly newsletter. Whether I need to understand that topic or not, I'll scan through that and see, okay, what's Moz saying about this topic? Because they've helped me develop this trust in their abilities. And I've never bought anything from, not that I won't buy services or products, but I haven't needed it to date. But when people ask me, like your question here is like, if you got the time and the inclination, go listen to those folks at Moz. They kind of have their act together here. And I just like the fact that they'll tell you when they know something and that they don't know something. That transparency is, to me at least, makes them a very credible source.
Nick, I'm really glad you brought up Moz because they actually have a great resource, which I try to visit often, which is their Whiteboard Friday. Every Friday, they've got this whiteboard presentation, and it can span the whole range of digital marketing topics from SEO to content to link building and on and on and on. But it's a really great resource for people, and just wanted to point that out.
Right.
Well, and I also think that speaks to, there may be some people listening who actually are SEO specialists and their business may be helping people. And so in trying to see the good that not everybody is a snake oil salesman, how do you think those people help also differentiate themselves? Is it by offering those one-off services? Is it by because their pricing's their pricing, like what can they do to differentiate themselves so people can feel comfortable reaching out and knowing that they're going to get a good job without spending $100, $300, $500, whatever it may be per month on search?
Well, this is kind of drawing on my consulting background from a few years back. The firm I was with, we were known to be able to be open, honest, and objective. That was our positioning. And one of the ways we did this, and I think it applies especially in the SEO space, is, when, an SEO specialist is approached with something a business owner is very capable of doing, say so. So you don't pay me to do this. Here, you go do this yourself, and here's what you should accomplish with it. So the ability for those folks to say no, don't engage with us for these very valid reasons, or change their service to be able to accommodate that, opportunity. That's a big credibility builder, as opposed to you just trust us, pay us $500 a month, and I'll throw together a bunch of reports every month that you're not going to understand. So just be open and transparent about it, and try to educate the business owners, not in all the complexities of what they're trying to accomplish, because that won't, be useful, but to get out there and explain this world to them so that, they're educating the consumers along with helping them.
I think too, I think there's a difference in service too, depending on company size. So if we think about a company like Disney, for instance, with many lines of products and many products within those lines, a little tweaked SEO could mean a huge difference in revenue, right, for Disney. Whereas, doing that same level of sort of monitoring and tweaking of someone's, say, site as a freelancer consultant, it's just not going to have the payback, right? And so, there's kind of different levels of service here and different needs for what level of SEO service you need.
Right. And that's why I like to go back to the Google best practices framework. Because if Google's telling you this is important to Google, it's important to Google. So is there other things you can do? Absolutely. But, do those basics first. Make sure you've accomplished everything that Google's telling you to do. And then you could, if you choose to spend an extra investment there, go ahead and do it. But not until that point. Not until you've kind of convinced yourself you've done what you need to do as far as the basics.
So, Nick, in another conversation that we had offline prior to this podcast, you had given an excellent example or shared a story with us about a client that you had taken on and the small tweaks that you made that did hugely help them within their personal franchise. Could you go into that a little bit more in depthly? Because I think sometimes it helps to have context around the content that we're discussing here with how some of these minor changes can really have lasting impact. And to Eric's point, depending on the industry, it may be more minimal or more impactful. But I think the story that you shared with us was a really great reminder of how you can look at some of this data and analyze yourself and make adjustments or hire somebody to do that. But could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, and it brings up a good contextual point around when I'm trying to engage with another business owner in that, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it's kind of a marketing blind spot, if you will, if you talk to traditional marketing people, in that when I engage with another business owner, I don't come asking about how they're doing in search immediately. I'm asking questions: how well is your business performing? Period. Because any marketing spent to drive clients to an underperforming business is kind of a waste. Whether that's search engine work or direct mail, it doesn't really matter. So I'll ask these questions. Well, how's your business operating? Do you have enough feedback to allow that? And invariably, of course, every business owner thinks you're doing a wonderful job. Most do, at least. I kind of suggest you start collecting some data and tell yourself that. And the sheer act of getting feedback from your customers alone is going to improve your business, because one, it's uncovering the skeletons that you may not have known about, and hopefully you're committed to fixing those skeletons. But also the sheer fact of asking your customers how well you're doing, you actually get some instant respect, credibility. Well, you care enough to ask, and you're actually listening. So that's what I put those kinds of things in place, and then just put the basic things out there. Do you have an active website? Are you out there worried about your online reputation in all these various different places? And putting those kinds of fundamental things in place, while they sound simple in themselves, the cumulative effect of that is pretty powerful. One, you get the owners engaged at a different level to help drive their growth that they may not have been aware of earlier. But then you start to generate data that can actually provide a lot of deep insight.
So let's say it's 4 years ago. I'm at my startup. I decide not to go with company X, and instead I'm going to take it on myself. We have a website. I have access to the content. Step one is to build out content or refresh it, whether that's through a blog or it's through images, but to do at least seasonally refreshment. Would you agree that's step number one?
Yeah, you need to have that methodology in place.
Okay, so that's step one. Step two would be, what do you suggest?
So and this is an assumption for your audience, if you have access to your website, and let's just use WordPress as an example because it's one of the more commonly used tools. And this gets technical, but there are plugins, free ones, in WordPress, and I'm not recommending this product. I'm just familiar with it. It's called Yoast, Y-O-A-S-T, SEO, that actually goes page by page and tells you, to the best of Yoast ability, where you've got SEO problems. Your keywords aren't being shown frequently enough, and it'll rate your pages. And if you're a committed business owner, now you wouldn't do this in a one-night session because it can be overwhelming, but you just kind of take on those Yoast recommendations one at a time. And again, you're assuming the Yoast algorithms are accurate, and you almost have to because you don't have any other data to say it's not. But it's giving you this guidance to go literally page by page through your website and make tweaks to it. It may not tell you about page loads and some of the other technical things, but like with the Google best practices, if it tells you you've got a problem here, you probably have a problem there, so you need to go correct it. So that would be kind of an ongoing care and feeding of the technology of the WordPress website that you should probably do. It can be overwhelming until you see it, but once you see it, and kind of understand what the recommendations are, it's pretty straightforward to go clean a lot of that up. You have to put some thinking time on it, but you can actually take care of that yourself. You don't need somebody to run a Yoast SEO at all. It's free. Okay,
so that would be step two. And then step three, is that when you start focusing on the Yelp reviews, or do you then kind of look at where you're ranking, start to track that data? What would be step three and what would be step four?
Well, step three, the reviews piece of it, because it's an ongoing aspect. And again, it's somewhat different for a digital business as opposed to brick and mortar. But reviews are a big deal in the Google land. And how do you collect those reviews? How do you publicize those reviews? And Yelp wouldn't be an answer for an online business necessarily, but you want people to say good words about the services and products you provide. And the only way you do it is to ask them. And if you're going to ask them, you might as well go public with it, because Google's going to reward you for doing that. And by the way, you're going to build a better business once you listen to your customers. It's the basics of business. Put good communications channels in place and let those play, but be committed to that. So if somebody does have a bad experience, deal with it in public, deal with it on your website if that's how you're collecting your reviews, and then talk to those customers if you can get access to them and learn and grow from that feedback. And painful as it may be, because it is, always will be, it's a very important part of your both digital operation, brick and mortar operation, and it feeds the Google searches of the world.
Okay, so that's step 3. And then step 4 would start to be taking all that information, and whether it's an Excel sheet or handwritten, some form of analysis where you can see, after you've implemented steps 1, 2, and 3, how you're doing with organic search.
Yeah. And that starts, to me at least, get into the world more complicated. But again, especially with a little bit of hand-holding up front, the world of analytics. Let's just pick Google Analytics because it's very commonly used. You start to look at that for a while, you start to see some trends. Where's your traffic coming from? What's coming from organic versus direct? And you start to see, at least if you're paying attention to that data and trying to infer behavior from it, things that you could possibly do to get better. But that's a deeper step. It's a very doable step with hand-holding. I think everybody that's gotten into the analytics always needs a little bit of, just show me some examples to get me started kind of thing. Let me work on one dashboard. And once you get comfortable with that, you can go and do a lot more self-service stuff itself. Google Analytics happens to be free. Comes with the Google product family. So I think that's probably the deeper dive on it. But, you kind of got to get all the foundational things in place. And then once you do that, now it's going to be more meaningful when you're looking at your analytic data.
Well, and that should also help kind of dictate the content that you're producing as well, based on some of those analytics. And then step 5, if I'm understanding correctly, would be to then look at some paid search, which I know goes into a separate conversation, but depending on how you're performing with steps 1 through 4, you could then assess if you needed to take the approach for step 5 or not, like you said with the barber.
Right. And it's paid, to me, because paid search engine marketing is a very broad topic in general, display ads, all kinds of things. When I say paid search, I'm literally just that. I'm paying to get better search results. There's the other aspects of search engine marketing. We could have those debates, whether they're worthy or not. That's not the point. But if you really do need to be performing at the top of your search results for a keyword that you can't do anything else, but pull out your credit card and pay Google to place you up top, you may need to do that. And then just think my barber example. There's no way for me to perform on barber with all the natural things I have available to me. I can't. So the only way to do that is to pay the good folks at Google to take me to number 1. And it does work. It does work. But you're just paying for search results. You're not paying for all the other things that go into search engine marketing. You could, but that's not. My point is only pay to get to number 1.
After my first startup didn't go according to plan, I did take on some consulting work where we really gained a sense of what the customer was looking for. And so I think whether you're a small business owner at a brick and mortar or online, you really want to make sure ultimately the bottom line is that you're listening to your customers. And now when we're consulting for Wickedly Smart with our agency, it's even more powerful because we have had the ability to work with very small clients and ones that have high budgets, but everybody's looking for the same thing. And so really it's just filling their needs when you can do so reasonably and educating them along the way.
Well, then here's a simple example of, and it's a real example. There was a review came through this week from one of the clients I'm supporting, The comment was, it was a great comment, great service. He said, is anybody reading these reviews? And I got with the owner within seconds. I said, you call this person up and say, absolutely, you're reading these reviews, and I'll almost, unless you screw this up, Mr. Business Owner, you got a customer for life, because you demonstrated that you're there, you care, you're present, and things like that. So that fostering that world, both digitally and the real world, is a big deal. It's a big deal. Whether you're a Sport Clips fan or you're a Wickedly Smart fan, all the above, that's a big deal. Obviously you've got the Disney fans. Let's go to even a bigger example of where you've got this rabid community out there. And that doesn't happen overnight. That does not happen by ignoring that community and just hoping they get, profess themselves. It just doesn't happen. And, Eric and I have had the luxury of working in Disney where those are conscious strategies to build that world out, to have that kind of fan base. And you can do that in the small, you can do it in the large. All that stuff still applies. It's the same with the digital world. You got people that love Amazon. Those things don't happen overnight. They don't happen by ignoring the customers. Guarantee it will not happen.
Yeah, Nick, we're actually consulting with a client now who, I'm sad to say, spent about low seven figures on a web presence, and they did it kind of with a build it and they will come mindset, without really thinking through how they're going to acquire their audience and build it, and how are they going to use things like SEO. And so it's a bit of a sad story, and it's going to be hard to kind of turn it around, but it's a mistake that I think people can really keep themselves from making.
Yeah. And, I suspect it may be more prominent in the digital world. I mean, that's our backgrounds in some respects, that, if you're in the digital space, think this concept of things are different. Well, kind of, but not really. It still comes down to, you got great customers, you know how to treat them well, you're providing great products and services. You may happen to be delivering those digitally, and that's great. But those fundamentals aren't different. I remember even in the back in the .com crazy days, in front of an audience of probably 500 people, one of the speakers got out and said, forget all the rules of business you've known to date. And it's like, well, that's insane. I thought I was the one that was crazy. Well, it comes to find out, those are still in play now, and they're still relevant, regardless of, whether you're a digital channel or a brick and mortar channel.
Nick, Eric and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to get on this podcast with us today to talk about all things search. And you definitely have enlightened me and opened my eyes on the way things that some business owners can do it a little bit differently or do it themselves. And so we're so appreciative, and thank you for having us. As an added bonus to anyone listening to this podcast, we actually are going to be doing a live Q&A on Crowdcast. And so if you check within the show notes, you should be able to sign up to catch Nick live and ask him any questions you may have. Otherwise, you can click and view the replay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you to Nick. I think you have a unique perspective, given you've got a brick and mortar and you're applying digital marketing to that. So thank you for joining us. I know that Nick is working on some additional materials as well, which we will keep this audience up to date on as that progresses.